All right, Herle Burly-ites. In air quotes, media's effort to always be on top of all the issues you care about. Here we are recording this podcast a mere 6 or so hours after the resignation of British Prime Minister Liz Truss, which is only 43 days and 18 hours less time than Ms. Truss's entire prime ministership. I don't know whether that's impressive or just sad. I'm going to go with impressive, mainly because of the strength of the guest we have on here to talk about it all. We are lucky I say, to welcome our excellent friend of the pod, Andrew MacDougall. Andrew is the former Director of Communications for Prime Minister Stephen Harper, but now he lives in London, where he's a director at Trafalgar Strategy. Writes about politics and current affairs and all the best journalistic places. In fact, you can go read his piece on where Britain's Conservatives go from here in the Star today. But for the purposes of our conversation, we're going to spend a little bit of time going back from here. What are the circumstances that led to a head of lettuce outlasting Liz Truss? Why have we had 5 Tory PMs in 6 years? What are the democratic implications of that? And how has the long tail of Brexit shaped all this? So Andrew, you're perfect for this. Thank you for taking the time to talk to our Canadian audience about what are some of the underlying forces that are driving British politics right now. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing well despite all the chaos. And thanks for having me back on. I always enjoyed chatting to you.
Yeah, well, you must be busy today. In demand, writing and commenting.
Yeah, no, it's one of those things as ever, like in my line of work, you sign up for some conferences. So I was stuck in a boardroom with a bunch of lawyers all day trying to write columns and do talk radio and like kind of half pay attention. So it's been a bit of a mess, but this is a nice way to end the day.
Yeah, I'm sure they understood.
Yeah, well, yeah, no, everybody's feeling a bit sheepish over here about the example they're sending out to the world.
Well, and if you were charging lawyers rates, then maybe you have to pay attention all the time. But since communications people never get to charge what the lawyers in the room charge.
No, we are the little people, as you know, David.
Yeah. All right. So, Andrew, everybody over here is caught up in this. Liz Truss's name recognition is stratospheric in Canada. But behind the lettuce jokes, I think something serious is happening. The UK is politically dysfunctional, and it may fit into a pattern of democratic decline that we're seeing around the West. So I don't really want to talk to you about handicapping the race to replace her or anything, because I think she's a symptom, not a cause, and likely true of the person who replaces her as well. So I want to talk to you more about root causes, and it feels to me like we should start with the economy. What are things like in the UK right now?
Yeah, well, David, I think the thing that people have to appreciate in Canada about the United Kingdom is it's not really a national economy. You have London in the southeast, and you have the rest of the country. And they are very different places economically, socially, culturally. And that's the fundamental tension. And all of the institutions of power here, Westminster, the banks, art, culture, all lives in London. And so you have a really top-heavy economy. And so you have politicians who live in this milieu and see only it as something they have to cater to. The financiers, Canary Wharf, the City of London, the kind of big earners and big global status makers for this country. And what you've had since Brexit really is the rest of the country going, hang on a second, I haven't done as great out of this global redistribution where London is a king city amongst king cities, but the rest of the country is not that way. And then you amplify that with Boris Johnson taking power 3 years ago to get Brexit done 3 years after people voted for it. And his promise was very much to redistribute, to level up those regions, the Newcastles, the Birminghams, the Manchesters, that are, although big cities in their own right, don't have the pop of a London. And now what you've run into is he ran aground, not for trying to do that, but for his own personal failings and breaking of lockdown rules and general kind of bad guyishness. And you have this Truss come in, who into this storm, now highly inflationary, cost of living, Ukraine, Russia, all that jazz, came out of the ideologue handbook with a whole bunch of unfunded tax cuts and threw it on a grease fire and has just gone up in flames. And she was, again, catering to the city and tacking back. They like low taxes. They want to be a growth place. But she forgot that she wasn't running against political opposition for her program. She was running against economic opposition in the form of the markets. And the famous Carville quote, right? Like the bond markets came back and you want to be them in the next life because you can turn anybody over. And so that's what's happened, is this tension between London and the rest of the country that no politician's been able to resolve since the days of Margaret Thatcher.
You make it sound like maybe they're on the right side, but just doing it wrong.
Well, look, I think all Western economies are struggling with fixing the imbalances caused by the global economy and globalization, whether that's, starting in the days of free trade in Canada, expanding out to when China joined the global economic architecture. I think there has been this concentration of wealth in urban areas where the skills and kind of people mix is right for the modern service economy or artistic economy. And it's left behind a lot of communities that were single industry towns where you didn't use your brains as much as you used your brawn. And the days when you have a good salary in one family member and support the entire household. But now opportunity is really concentrated in places that are growing more and more expensive. And politicians have never gripped the kind of reskilling and retraining. And now latterly have not gripped the fact that cities are unaffordable and they have to build homes and build the kind of homes that people want to live in. And that's the same in Toronto, Vancouver as it is in London.
I was just going to say, wait a second, you're describing Canada.
Yeah, it is something that is endemic to our type of society. Like maybe not Germany, because Germany is one of those rare industrialized economies that has 7 or 8 cities that are all broadly comparable in terms of their economic pull and industrial pull. But Britain and the US certainly statistically are the worst inequality-wise. There is the biggest gap between the haves and the have-nots. And that, by the way, exists within London. I live in a borough of London in the southeast that you don't have to go too far to find some distress. 10-minute train ride away, you can be amongst the plutocrats, living their best lives. I just came here from the city of London after that conference, and the amount of wealth and restaurants and kind of 500-pound dinner tabs that are being picked up there like it's water. And so there's that tension that Western politicians have been very slow to grasp that is now manifesting itself in this frustration from people. And then you add to all of that, David, this kind of polluted information economy we're in, where people can be delusional and not know they're being delusional because they only hear and see from delusional people and they talk to their own crowd. And so politicians are not only kind of caught up in these cities living a certain city life, they're no longer hearing the people on the outside, and the people on the outside of those places aren't hearing what's coming from the inside. So you have this kind of, the Obama line about the epistemological crisis where we can't even agree on what's happening. And in politics, as you well know, becomes impossible the second we can't even agree on what's happening. We can't fix it. How do you fix it if you can't agree on what's happening? And so I think getting back to Britain, there's been a lot of that. A lot of misdiagnosis and a lot of treating of the symptoms instead of the disease, and of which Liz Truss is the latest manifestation. She came into a harsh reality armed with kind of unicorns and rainbows, and that's not what you need to get through life. In the current circumstance we're in.
Just as you were talking, I was thinking that one of the political challenges of this is how obtuse those of us who are winners from this new economy are about our success.
Yeah, 100%. And more to that, we heap scorn on the people that don't get it. And this is the kind of pernicious nature of the meritocracy. We think, okay, my parents put me through school. That was their opportunity, their gift to me. And I've kind of done the best I could do. And you have to realize that not everybody has that opportunity or wants that opportunity. And we tend to look down on them. And then, if that expresses itself in a cultural kind of manifestation about discomfort with immigration, people kind of taking my opportunity, we then kind of look down on them for thinking that, even though they might not be thinking it out of hate or even ignorance, but just lack of contact and experience, and that's right. The London thing. You walk around this place.
Or even reality in some cases.
Yeah. And look, I walk through London and you take for granted the tremendous diversity, the kind of depth of experience. But you don't have to go too far out into Kent, the other way on the train line from going into London from my house. And it gets as white as snow out there, and people that don't have a lot of contact with a different life. And we have to, again.
That sounds a lot like Montreal versus the rest of Quebec right now.
Yeah,
which is manifesting itself very directly in their politics.
Yeah, and these are the things. And this is where, again, getting back to that point of the people who have over time raised questions about immigration levels and assimilation, and are we doing this right? They have a point. A society can absorb a certain amount of different every year. And it takes a lot more work than I think we think it takes to make people feel comfortable with it, to get opportunity for the people who are coming in. I mean, look at the skills accreditation debate in Canada. That's been a tough thing to crack for forever. And I think we again, we're a bit too dismissive with people that put their hand up and go like, I'm not super comfortable with this. And it's like, oh, racist, Luddite, like, what are you thinking? And how does that build understanding? We have to show a bit more charity to people that don't live the same existence we have. Right. Like we'll make out like bandits in the service economy. We're university educated. We're smart people. We can adapt. But that's a blessing that's been conferred to us by our parents or by circumstance. And not everybody can do that.
People also don't, in your experience in politics, people don't tend to vote for people who judge them harshly, do they?
No, and no, they don't. You can trick them some of the times, David, but you can't do it. But look, I mean, that's the Hillary Clinton experience with the deplorables. It's Obama with clinging to their guns and religion. Like it is the hardest thing to have that empathy in a competitive, partisan political environment to understand your opponent, and that's like. It's the classic case is that you cannot really be confident of your own argument unless you can make your opponent's argument in good faith better than they can. And I think a lot of politicians and political staff now skip that step of trying to be charitable enough to understand what's being articulated against them because for all sorts of reasons, but negative partisanship is now the drug that kind of gets butts to the polls. And we're so big on goosing up our own supporters by revving them up, not because we want to do something great for the country, but because we don't want the other guys to do something bad to the country. And then that's not a positive place to start from. And that's, again, a lot of Britain too, and Brexit and all that. It all kind of comes from that. And we can't get off that drug.
Herle Burly-ites, last week, on behalf of our presenting sponsor, TELUS, I finally announced where these last couple of months of talking about spectrum policy in Canada were headed. The launch of TELUS's white paper, Reforming Canadian Spectrum Policy for 5G and Beyond. I want to make a very clear point on why TELUS undertook this project in the first place. Over a year in research and writing, examining best practices from around the world. Like so many of you, TELUS cares deeply about providing connectivity to all of us, urban, rural, and Indigenous communities, and what that connectivity brings to our lives. Occasionally, if they sound a little whiny or frustrated in these ads, that's just a misplaced expression of their passion for connecting Canadians. But you all know, as well as I do, whining doesn't lead to anything constructive. In fact, if you're a regular listener, you'll know that TELUS has lauded recent government decisions that get spectrum auctioned and deployed sooner. And so the role of their white paper is to put forward constructive ideas and solutions. Solutions that can help us adopt 5G technology as quickly as possible, compete and lead in the global innovation economy, reduce GHG emissions faster and meet our climate change goals, access job opportunities, as well as advances in healthcare and education. Have a read for yourself, Herle Burly-ites. It's at telus.com/spectrum policy. So let's jump to Brexit. And I want to ask you what kind of fault line the Brexit referendum and then the implementation of Brexit, I don't know actually which is more significant of the two fault lines. Because, I read, Mark Carney said the other day that before Brexit, the UK economy was 90% the size of the German economy, and it is now 70% the size of the German economy. Well, that feels like a catastrophic decline that everybody in the country would be feeling.
Yeah, well, he actually got pulled up by quite a few economists online who were talking about the kind of convertibility of the currency over that time. So it wasn't an apples to apples comparison. But I think it is indisputable, David, that there has been a hit. And even the government's own figures, which they didn't release prior to the referendum, prior to negotiating the separation, showed an estimated 5% hit to GDP over the coming years from unplugging from the single market. And look, if you consider that if the UK were to sign a new free trade deal with States, which is a long way off, that would only net at 0.2% of GDP. So you'd have to do 25 some odd US trade deals to recoup what you've lost with the EU. So no matter what way you look at it, it's been bad. And it's been bad mostly for the small to medium enterprises that don't have the compliance departments to kind of do all the new paperwork to work that through. And they didn't have to think twice about selling to Europe because they could just ship it across. And now they can't recreate that with markets further afield because, again, they don't have people that can get through the paperwork of how do I do a trade deal with Ethiopia or Singapore or whatever. It's just not the same. And And we've elided that discussion here. And will it come back now that we're prone on the floor, kind of unable to fend for ourselves? Hopefully we should. If the government really wants to go for growth, the easiest thing to do would be to knock on the door of the EU and go like, hey guys, sorry about the last 6 years. And you know what? I don't think Europe would shoo us away. I think they realize that they're a bit stronger with Britain in the tent than they are with Britain outside the tent.
Is that even in the discussion?
No, not really. And if you want to see Keir Starmer, the Labour Party leader, dance, just get him kind of talking about that. But certainly like in any sane society where we're grappling with reality, it should be a part of the conversation, because it really is the easiest and quickest thing you can do. And this is the thing that Liz Truss couldn't get her head around. To go for growth, what you need is highly skilled immigration in a significant volume, because the labor market here is tight. There's just no room for the economy to grow. And you need your closest market that most of your businesses can ship to, that are now finding it very hard to ship to it. You need to reverse those two things. You do those two things, you're much better positioned for growth than if you do free ports or low taxation zones in Sunderland. Businesses don't want to go to Sunderland just like a tax incentive. That's not going to work. They need the skilled employees. They need all the supporting education infrastructure that's just not in those places, because nobody's paid attention to them for a very long time.
But you're talking about Truss's policy, and it has been my hypothesis without knowing anything. So I'm happy for it to be wrong. It has been my hypothesis that the reason that the Conservative Party in the UK could not come up with a coherent economic policy is because you can't build coherence on the pack of lies that were their Brexit promises. Yeah, and so as long as you have to cling to the lies that were Brexit, you can't really construct something that makes sense.
Yeah, or you certainly can't construct something that is robust enough to kind of get the UK to where it needs to get to. But yeah, I don't think you're wrong in that the central premise is like we tied both our arms behind our backs and are now saying we're going to punch people out and go for growth. It's just not going to happen. It'd be better if we had our hands free to kind of use all our skills. And yeah, we're not. And it doesn't matter how many stats. I mean, this is the thing. Like, this is the really awful thing about the pickle we're in with this kind of disinformation or low information economy, is that showing facts that reinforce your case are more likely to harden the argument on the other side. That's just where we are. People feel they have made a very serious life choice on Brexit, and it will take, much like imagine like an alcoholic hitting rock bottom to kind of realize like, maybe I do need to reconsider it. And then is what's happening now enough? Probably not. But it would have to be the Conservatives that lead that discussion to make it kind of stick.
But haven't all the lies been exposed? Like, where's the NHS money, the money for the health system that was was some outrageous figure that they said they were shipping to Europe that could be applied to the National Health Service? Well, yes. Surely people are asking about that.
Yeah, 350 million a week is what they were saying. If you could take all the, an astronomical sum of money. Yeah, and look, right. The wait list for treatment, much like in Canada, it's 7 or 8 million people that are waiting for things like cancer screens. It's awful. Even I today, I have a torn rotator cuff, and I have the prospect of waiting 6 months on the NHS to get a scan.
Was it the splitter? Was it throwing the splitter?
Yeah, no, is that? Yeah, but that's actually the motion that kills me the most. But it was like, you can either pay 500 quid and get an ultrasound and a guided injection to kind of ease it, or you wait 6 months. And that then further reinforces the disparity between the haves and the have-nots. And yeah, I think this is, again, just that people don't even want to touch that third rail. And this is the danger when any democratic society dresses up a government program as an identity. It becomes untouchable. You can't have a rational discussion about it. And since when should we be defined by the kind of healthcare system we have? The Scandi countries have a different healthcare system. It's good. It's better than ours or Canada's. It doesn't have to be the States or that. There are models that blend the two systems and do it equitably. Why can't we have a serious? Because it's part of the opening ceremonies in the London Olympics in 2012. It's totemic. And these sacred cows, no politician guts them because you die if you do that.
But on the money side of it, like, why are the Conservatives not being held accountable for the lies they told during the Brexit referendum?
Well, I think this is it, because they then held the cudgel back of going, well, the people voted for this, and you don't want, and Labour having lost all those seats in the north, partially because of Brexit, but with retrospect, more because Jeremy Corbyn was a crazy anti-Semite, wacky lefty. It was as big the problem there. And they just haven't felt strong enough to do that. But with Keir Starmer 30 points up in the polls, maybe there's some capital to spend there going, I've come in, I've looked at the books. It's bad. We all know it's bad. The Tories have just hobbled us and put up taxes to the highest levels since the post-Second World War era. You're feeling poor. If we're serious about doing this now, we need to take another look at this, and this is what it will get us. And maybe people at that point will go, that doesn't sound so bad anymore. And even if you look at the polling, it's now kind of back in the 60-40 position of people who would revisit the referendum. So and I think all it would take is the EU like softly saying, we won't make this a big deal, because they need the UK and they still have the defense cooperation, but their economy is so much more robust with the UK plugged into it than it is without it. And it's not like the continent's without problems. Look at Italy, look at France and the protests that are going out there. Look at Germany kind of going it alone on their energy policy and making everybody angry again. It's kind of shades of the financial crisis with the North versus South. So it's not a given that things will be better there. So let's all hope we can have rational, things get so bad, you can have a rational discussion again.
Remember how miserable it is to scrape off your car and then get it running in the morning with 30 below zero wind working against you, hardening the ice and turning the engine oil into molasses? Well, imagine the same exercise, only with a 200-ton locomotive hitched to a mile of boxcars. The Farmer's Almanac, for what it's worth, is predicting a pretty rough winter this year, with what it calls unreasonable, yes, unreasonable, not unseasonal, cold in eastern Canada, and a glacial hibernation zone in the prairies. The railroaders at our sponsor, CN, have a term for that. Tier 3 weather, meaning colder than minus 36 degrees Celsius. That kind of cold attacks a train. It stiffens gaskets and airlines, interfering with braking. It puts ice crystals between wheels and tracks, causing damage that can be serious if not discovered and remedied. And of course, it covers everything with layers of snow and ice, challenging even a locomotive. None of that, though, changes the fact that cargo has to move. Canada's grain farmers are shipping millions of tons of this year's crop right now, and will continue to do so for months to come, and getting it to market is CN's job. The railway is absolutely determined that trains will depart and arrive on schedule. To ensure that, CN has built some formidable defenses against winter. Sophisticated track and wheel sensors, a brand new network of detectors equipped with high-end microphone tech to suss out faulty bearings, avalanche forecasting and avoidance, and special air cars that keep pneumatic pressure even along the length of a train's braking system. CN's air car fleet is unique in North America, and so effective it may change the rules on how fast a train is allowed to go in extreme cold. Meanwhile, CN's rapid response crews strive mightily to keep tracks open and clear. Last week, after fire destroyed a trestle bridge in northern Alberta, CN workers moved 60,000 cubic yards of earth and gravel into the resulting depression, laying new tracks where the bridge once stood. Grain and forest products were moving again within a week. Like I said, cargo has to move. Yeah, but so regret's one thing, but I'm still curious now in retrospect, as you've watched the last 6 years or so unfold. Why did a majority of residents vote for Brexit? What were they voting for?
I think it was the issue that Nigel Farage, the way he was coming at it, that the official Leave campaign didn't touch, and that's immigration. I think you had a lot of people. And let's not forget the summer that the campaign and Cameron's negotiation and renegotiation, that was when Syria was imploding and millions of refugees were coming across continental Europe. When Merkel famously let them all in and France and people were piling up at the Calais border. That was the context that was happening. The worst possible time for that kind of thing to happen. And it was just this sense of the country's not the same as it was. And that's not because people were overtly racist, but because, you can go to places like Peterborough in Lincolnshire and hear more Polish than you do English. And you will see the pressure on the NHS that creates and on schools, getting school places. And that's the kind of thing I think most people were voting on. And if you look back through the polling, immigration was the thing that the Dominic Cummings crowd and Boris and Michael Gove knew they couldn't hit too hard because people would judge them for doing that. So they made the kind of Singapore on the Thames, we'll be out from under the yoke of the EU, we can set our own rules, we can take back control. But the control was always about people moving, even if they didn't say it explicitly. So I think that, and even now, if you look at Truss yesterday, lost her Home Secretary, a woman named Suella Braverman. And it was, predicated on the miscommunication of sensitive information, which was really just pretext that they had a big row about immigration because Liz Truss's plan for growth, guess what, included plans for more skilled immigration. And Braverman was like, this is antithetical to our coalition, to our Brexit supporting people. They will not tolerate this. And so that tension is still there. And whoever comes in to pick up the pieces will still have to wrestle with that problem again, and getting into conversations that you can't have a proper rational discussion. Like the kind of opposition to immigration, it was most virulent in the places in Britain where you never saw it. You ask people in London about immigration, they don't care. They love it because the barista at the pret-a-manger, they get their coffee is Spanish, the waiter at the pub is Italian. Like you see it all over the place. You work in a multinational. Yeah.
Wait a second. This is a huge dilemma. And I'm super interested in your perspective, because, you're kind of got an interesting background. I mean, you've identified as a conservative in your life, but you're a pretty small liberal person on a lot of issues, as I know, and you're a communications expert and a public policy communications expert. So here is the dilemma. So for people not living in large urban centers, the world's changing too fast, and they're uncomfortable with it. It is, however, in all of the equity ways, changing in ways in which we approve of, which we think are progress. Immigration and diversity we consider to be progress. Gay rights we consider to be progress. Legalization of marijuana we consider to be progress. Whatever it is, whatever change we consider these things to be progress, and the people in smaller communities don't. And it's causing a lack of social cohesion in places all over the Western world. What are you supposed to do about that? Slow down on equity for people of color because it's disconcerting to people in rural areas? Like, what are you supposed to do?
Yeah, I think ultimately, David, for me, it always comes back to the economy. And I think these people in these small towns, that's picking back up on our earlier conversation, they have seen their opportunity in life decrease a bit. Industries left town. They just don't have as many options as people have. So when they see people coming into the country to work, I think that feels more to them like that's another route that's blocking off my progress. Whereas I live in London, 100,000 Spaniards come to work in the bars. Well, they're not taking my job. And they're not competing against me, right? So I think fundamentally, when the economy is doing well and people feel that they have an opportunity to plug into growth and that opportunity and development, they feel more sanguine about stuff like that. And that's like, well in politics, if people are feeling down or dismal about their prospects, they get tetchy about things like cultural issues and immigration. So I think the principal thing politicians need to do is to keep the economy going as much as they can. And then, to my kind of personal makeup, it'd be kind of the classic liberal. I believe the individual, no matter what they look like, has rights and deserves to be treated with respect and inequality. Equality. And I don't think that shouldn't be, that should be the bridge. And that's why I worry so much, incidentally, about the cultural discourse on the left now, this kind of intersectionality and kind of, politics of identities. It reduces us back to categories. And I thought we were past that time where you are gay, you are black, you are like, no, we're human beings. And yes, some of us face more challenges than others.
That's what attracted me to, it was Pierre Trudeau's vision of that attracted me to liberalism in the first place. Yeah,
it's that whole thing of that mosaic or melting. Like it's that thing that everybody can come here and have a fair go of it. And I think that's, again, predicated on the economy expanding. And what we're seeing is our societies age and slow down and growth slows down and we shift from a hand and workman-like kind of economy into a higher end brain economy. It's harder to educate and bring people along. There are only so many university spaces. There's only so many, and that's why so many university grads for the last generation have kind of trained up their brains and don't have the space to go into the economy and do what they want to do. So they end up having jobs that aren't satisfying. And that's another tension. And ultimately immigration and bodies need to be a part of that. But we need to realize that they don't plug in seamlessly, that people, we are hardwired, David, to mistrust things that don't look like us or sound like us.
I read Sapiens. I know how bad this is. Yeah.
Or like Putnam and Bowling Alone, right? And you do get to a point where solidarity erodes the more difference there is, because we need that heuristic of, you are like me, brother. And that's why we feel comfortable when we bump into Canadians when we're traveling abroad. Even if we don't know them, we know we have something in common, and that unites us. And that politicians, I wish, when we talk about questions like identity, people think that that's kind of some sort of brainwashing. But I would rather we embrace an identity as Canadians and values instead of a program like healthcare, because that's not something that you can, like, that will break down. And then what do you have? And so it should be more, in my mind, on those classic liberal, the kind of Martin Luther King vision of that's something that we should all be able to buy into. And that's like, woe be to anyone that tries to mess with that and reduce it back to, no, you're different and you're hard done by because this person who's never met you is from this category and is oppressing you. It's like, look, I'm a middle-aged white cisgender, like a man. Like, why? Like, I apparently don't have. I have life experience. I have experience in politics. Why should I not be able to share some of these things? Like, why am I denied standing? I want everyone to have standing, and I don't think my voice counts more than others, but I have every right to say what I want to say. And that's, another problem is we're now in this environment where people feel shamed out of speaking, and we need to encourage everyone to speak and know that if they speak, they won't get hurt. The answer to a bad idea is a big debate and a better idea. It's not shutting people up and shutting them down. And we need to recover that confidence. And again, it's that classic liberal idea that we advance when we debate and we stimulate and we be controversial and we pick fights and we do it respectfully and in good faith. And that's how we progress. What the fuck this has to do with Brexit, I can't remember. But it's that kind of symbol of we've lost that ability to do that. And we retreat to very narrow arguments and very simplistic calculations that don't reflect the rich kind of data tapestry that we have out there to make our case. And we're fearful of making the case on immigration, on integration, on all these things.
But there's a contradiction at the heart of what you said in this thing. It's not your contradiction. I don't mean to critique what you said, but what you said is we really need to address the economics of people outside of the major economic engines, right? And whether that's London or frankly Toronto, you need to address what's going on outside those major engines. Except the establishment of both countries that we're talking about, which are overwhelmingly supportive of the changing social order and of immigration, are also the foremost proponents and beneficiaries of the existing economic order. Right? Yeah. So you don't actually hear anybody anywhere talk seriously about making any economic changes that would fundamentally change the distribution of wealth in either of our countries.
Yeah, and I would even go one step further and extend that to the media. There is a uniformity of experience at the upper crust. And I don't mean economically. I mean people who pull the levers of discourse and power. You're absolutely right. They are blind to what they don't see. And I call that the Amazon problem. Like Justin Trudeau will go open an Amazon fulfillment facility east of Ottawa and think it's a great thing. But he wouldn't spend a day working in that fulfillment center, walking around like a slave, filling up people's orders. You love Amazon because you get your stuff cheaply and delivered to your door. You're in that category of the upper crust. If you're the one that's delivering it and you don't use the Uber Eats, like you're in the other category. And if you want kind of a simple categorization, that's probably it. Are you an Uber Eats person or are you not? Are you an Amazon order or are you not? And that I can pretty much guarantee everybody in politics is in one bit of that. And that's so whether it's newsrooms or politics, how do we get people from those backgrounds that don't? And you used to have the Labour Party here in Britain. It was the party of the working class. It was the shop stewards. It was the people that got into elected politics. They didn't have
changed that, right?
Yeah. And look, the third way, the kind of Clintonization, Blair, it made it a professional occupation. It was something you did as a career. And you see that now of, Justin Trudeau kind of farted around and did a few things before he was elected as an MP, but nothing kind of super serious. Pierre Poilievre has been an MP since he was like a fetus, it feels like. And that blinds you again to that experience, and like you need those farmers that have worked the fields for 30 years and then decide, well, I know my community, I'm going to go stand and get elected. And you need that richness of background and experience. And we're losing that, whether that's politics and the media. And we have to find a way to get that back, because ultimately they bring issues to the table, per your earlier point, that we just don't. And it's the hardest thing in life to realize what you're blind to. And that's the thing, like, I was just ranting against, like, why can't I get to say anything? But you have to be, again, in that empathy, aware of what your experience is like and how it's different from people. And I know that, the start in life my parents gave me isn't the start in life a lot of people can give you. So you have to, it's not just enough to say equality of opportunity. You actually have to work at delivering that, starting, I think, with education. And if I were ever to get in frontline politics, the more attention you focus on that, the more problems you solve down the line. Because fixing it after the fact, after you've been working for 30 years and trying to teach an old dog some new tricks, it's very hard to do, or else we would have done it.
Indigenous youth are the fastest growing population in the country. They are the leaders and agents of change for their communities and the country as a whole. And they deserve access to education and meaningful livelihoods that embrace their cultures and worldviews. Herle Burly-ites, this is why the MasterCard Foundation LAV program works with Indigenous youth and partners across Canada, transforming education and employment systems to embrace Indigenous approaches and values. More than 10,700 Indigenous youth have been supported by the LAV program to date. Their goal is to support 100,000 Indigenous young people in accessing post-secondary education and attaining meaningful employment by 2030. For more information, visit takingflighttogether.ca and tune in on October 26th at 9 p.m. on APTN for the official launch of LAV, celebrating the successes of Indigenous youth. But it is also true that, lots of people don't have the same life objectives. They don't want to pursue the best possible career they could possibly have. They want to live in their town. They want to play on the old timers hockey team with their old friends. They want to take care of their parents. And there really isn't a lot of room for that anymore.
No, and that's the kind of somewheres anywheres debate and the citizens of the world that Theresa May kind of riffed on. But yeah, and we, even personally, we certainly feel that in London. We have a very kind of interesting, exciting life here in London, but we also have 2 young kids, and they're a long way away from their family and cousins and things. And some days you just, you wake up and you wish you were in Laval with all of that around you, because God, that would make life richer and more interesting. And I think we do make that confusion between the kind of superficial things in life that I get to go to Chelsea football on the weekends. Oh, there's so many great gigs that are here. But at the end of the day, that stuff comes and goes. What stays with you, what you value, what you leave on this earth is ultimately the people you know and the family you have. And I think we have gotten a long way away. And again, the policymakers have privileged that kind of existence over, how do I make life more affordable so if people want to stay in their towns and do those things, that is as good a life as anything I can do, and probably better if you look at like the modern financial industry and the kind of wizardry that doesn't really contribute to the real economy. Like, give me the cop in the small town any day over that. The person that runs the diner, like, they do more for their community than the guy in the 36th floor of the TD Tower in downtown Toronto. Like, chances are.
Yeah, but we're off in some fantasy world here, Andrew, because you could listen to people talk about the economy for 100 years and never hear this conversation. Nobody talks about doing anything like this. People talk about growth at the macro level and how do we get into critical industries and various things. Nobody's interested in what we're talking about. But we talked about it. We're interested in what we're talking about. I actually want to touch on media with you.
Yeah.
And my entree to the media, because, in the UK, you have, I presume, the usual villain of social media, but you also have this incredibly rapacious tabloid journalism mentality that we're all familiar with from The Crown and other things. But in any event, I always thought that British politics could occasionally be funny, could occasionally be scandalous, but was always serious. And I always thought there were serious people in charge in Britain, that the people that became prime minister were accomplished people of substance, may or may not be good at that job, but they were there for a reason. They'd been chosen for a reason, and they were serious people. And now the run that the country has been on, I mean, the politics has become frivolous. I mean, you go back to David Cameron, I mean, he at least looked the part, but all anybody ever said to me about him was he looks the part, he went to the right schools, and he only fucked a dead pig once as far as we know. And then after that, it's become dramatically worse. So what is happening to who the fuck gets elected prime minister in the UK? And the frivolity of UK politics.
Well, yeah, and look, I can make the same argument about Justin Trudeau, but that's not the point. That's not the point. That's not the point here, right? But yeah, I think so. I think a couple things to unpack there. I think the hothouse of public life is worse now because of the proliferation of social media. You know, it was one thing if a tabloid took a run at you, but that was one gun in a field of very few guns. And it was serious when it was turned on you, but that was also part of the game. And you can manage that relationship better. You know, you could kind of smooth those edges, cozy up to those editors. You could do something about that. Now it's just a free-for-all, and everything is above board. Everybody has their camera on you. Every foible, everything is caught. And so I think that makes people avoid public life, particularly women. And you see this in Canada, Catherine McKenna and countless others, the shit they have to put up with. Any woman that's online, even like my better half is a journalist, like the crap that gets said. Like, why would you put yourself up for that? Why would you live apart from your family? Why? Like, there's so many things stacked against participation in public life. And then, yeah, like, it just makes it not worthwhile. And I think that's the big part of the problem too. And then there's this idea that it's hard, there's barriers to get into in terms of money, although that's not as particular, that's more a US problem. But it is an issue here. You need some resource to do this thing called public life. It's not just good enough to be a shop steward and have the party behind you. You have to be some sort of, you know, if you're a Rishi Sunak type who made a lot of money before coming in, you have no problem kind of putting some pounds down and getting a nomination in a safe seat and working the system like that. But it takes connections. And again, it's this kind of elite upper crust that's up there that has those connections, that is more likely to travel in those circles. And you get these MPs that know each other from the City of London that bomb out to the safe seats in Yorkshire over the local farmer or over the local businessman. And so the system kind of, again, the wealth concentrates and kind of privilege and power does as well. And so I think that's part of it as well. And yeah, like Boris Johnson, it's not like everybody saw this coming. He got fired from his first job in journalism for making up a quote from a relative. Like, let that be a red flag. He's kind of, but that's the classic British thing of failing upwards and the kind of entertaining charlatan, right? But yeah, you don't want them. But those kind
of people didn't used to become prime minister.
Well, yeah, I mean. So
are the residents of the UK taking politics less seriously than they used to take it?
Well, I think they've also, David, I think it's hard to unpick from the fact that people have felt that politics has been broken for a while. So the serious people didn't solve a couple of the really tough problems that we were talking about earlier about like reskilling, retraining, like post-deindustrialization. Nobody, like Thatcher was serious. Major was serious. Tony Blair was serious. But we've kind of lost that ability to deliver public policy that matters to people. And so they get so fed up that when Boris Johnson goes, I can fix this, they go like, why not? Or Donald Trump shows up and goes, at least he gets what my life is like. And he wants to stick it to the man as much as I do. Yeah, why not give that person a shot? And so I think there's a bit of that as well. And so I don't think it's simple as like the clowns are taking over. Britain's always had a problem with privilege and the number of prime ministers that come from Eton or Oxbridge. You know, that's a thing in Britain. You know, even I've been here 9 years, you still do get like the look down the nose from people who hear the colonial accent. Like that is still a thing here. And the kind of fact that Labour, the party that was not that, has become a metropolitan university kind of culture, woke kind of driven thing. And Starmer's trying to kind of move it back.
Like the Democrats or the Liberals and the NDP.
Yeah. And I think ordinary people go like, does anybody care about me and my life. And that's why I think in Canada, the Liberals have to worry about Pierre Poilievre, as you guys have discussed on this podcast, the Curse of Politics, is he's trying to speak to those people who feel that they don't have people speaking for them. And we go, oh, look at the, dog whistle. These people aren't all racist.
At least the NDP recognize it and are afraid of it. The Liberals don't even notice it.
Well, yeah, and it's going to be interesting because I think it's one of those things like it's a classic Pauline Kael was like, I don't know anybody that voted for Nixon. And it's like, well, because you don't talk to normal people. Like that's your problem, So yeah, I mean, it's there's a lot that we have to self-awareness that a lot of people in politics and public policy need to have that don't have because they don't live lives that are like ordinary lives. And it's not like you have to kind of go hang out in like do some poverty tourism or something like that. But you do have to listen. You do have to actively work to kind of do that empathy and think about, like, am I solving the right problem? Should I be glorifying university education again and again and again when Germany shows you a different model of skilled trades, unions working together with private business to get a workforce that you need, where you can have a high-paying job, and it shouldn't be shameful for a parent in Toronto to look at their kid and go, you want to be a millwright? Great. You want to be a plumber? You will never lack for work. You will have a life. You will provide for your family. You will meet people. And it's not to you don't have to be a superstar financier or a lawyer or a doctor. You be a plumber. There's nothing wrong with that. It's a great career. And even like it feels weird because I start thinking in my head, do I want my daughters to be plumbers? I'm like, what? Why not? Like house builders say, like, God, they charge you a fortune, so they're doing it. Like the guy that redid this kitchen is living large, I can tell you. Listen,
take a job that's globalization proof. Take a job where you just have to be better than the next guy down the road, not better than everybody in the whole fucking world.
As I think about the AI that's going to be writing my columns in 2 seconds.
Exactly. Hey, listen, I got one last question for you, and maybe it's a dumb question, but it's a question I think about when I think about the UK.
Yeah.
Which is Canada. Growing up in Canada in my lifetime, I've never had anything but a sense that every year Canada was going to be bigger than it had been the year before, more prosperous than it had been the year before, better place than it had been the year before, more influential in the world than it had been the year before. Just growth. The UK is in a way in a period of constant decline. Constant, inevitable decline. And maybe that decline has been sped up in the last decade, but it's been a factor for a long time. Decline in terms of global influence, decline in terms of its economic significance in the world, and decline in terms of its standard of living. So what is the mentality of a population in that circumstance?
God, you made me so depressed there. This is, but yeah. And look, I think the first thing you have to stop doing is amusing yourself to death, to pick up Neil Postman's book. Like things are on fire and we're fucking about with TikTok. Like, Jesus fucking Christ. Like, are we aiming at the wrong targets? And it is like, look, put your phone down, go talk to your neighbor, go get involved in your community, listen to their concerns, be a citizen. That's the kind of stuff I think that's the way back is that's the way that you get solidarity. Don't just glue yourself to the people online that have the same perspective and experience of you. Experience that rich tapestry of life. Talk to the guy at the bar that came in with his trades belt on. Like, you'll learn something, and that, that's not a public policy prescription, but we have to remember how to be humans again and to be charitable again. And I think all good things will come from that. And yeah, it's being a bit harder edged about the Chinas of the world and realizing that like we have made a bet for the last 30 years that has been spectacularly wrong. And we got to get together and realize that the French, the British, the Canadians, they're our brothers in this. China, Russia, they are not. And it's okay to say that. We don't dislike the Chinese people, but their government, bad people. And I think it's about being comfortable with having that moral clarity about that and what we stand for, and picking back up that classic liberal. Like, we are societies that believe in the primacy of the individual and in all our glory and the rights that we all have as human beings. And that has been the engine that has progressed our societies further and faster than any other societies on the planet in human history. And woe to us if we forget that. And we're forgetting that in the culture wars in Western societies, in the snootiness about economic opportunity and careers that are worthy. And we have to remember that we are on a team, and that team are those things. And if we do that, then I think we have a chance. If we just give in to the kind of despair and amusing ourselves to death and kind of fiddling while Rome burns, well, then you deserve to burn. That's human history. Empires go down. And yet Britain's been on the way down since the Second World War, but it's still a mighty place. It's still the fifth largest economy in the world. London is still one of the world's great cities. The talent and the answers are there if we only know how to look for them and have the courage to look for them.
Well, that call to solidarity, which I heartily endorse, is a great moment to end this on. Thanks very much for taking time out of your evening. I want to point out to my listeners that this is nighttime for Andrew in London. So thank you so much for taking time out of your evening to have this conversation with me. I found it, as always, really interesting to talk to you. I'd like to thank our presenting sponsor, TELUS, our sponsor, CN Rail, as well as MasterCard Foundation. I'd like to thank everybody who watched or listened, and Andrew MacDougall. Thank you very much. We'll see you all next week with more Herle Burly.